Welcome everyone to History Gone Wilder, part of Half History Will Travel. I'm your host, the Wilder historian, Dr. Lucas Wilder, and last time, the fighting on July 2nd ended, and now I'm moving into the climactic day at Gettysburg, July 3rd. If you like what I do, please consider subscribing to the channel if you haven't done so already, join the Patreon page, and purchase something from one of my online stores. Every little bit helps. Thank you. On the night of July 2nd, soldiers from both sides began throwing up breastworks to protect themselves from what may transpire the next day. They looked for comrades that were missing and tried to get some sleep from the exhausting day. Army of the Potomac commander George Meade met with his commanders at his headquarters at the Leicester House. In that meeting, it was decided that the Union Army would stay and fight, not withdraw. Robert E. Lee's Army of Northern Virginia was wore out, but Lee knew that he would have a fresh division of men in the morning, those under Confederate Major General George Pickett. He planned for an assault to take place following an artillery bombardment to soften up the Union defenses on Cemetery Ridge. Not only that, but Richard Ewell's Second Corps would once again attack Culp's Hill to prevent reinforcements being sent to the sector targeted by Pickett. Ewell was reinforced by brigades from Robert Rodes' division, but the Union also received additional reinforcements. Henry Slocum, the 12th Corps commander, returned many of his troops to Culp's Hill, and although some of Ewell's men held parts of the slopes, Slocum readied his troops to defend themselves when dawn approached. At 4:30 a.m., an artillery bombardment disturbed the morning air as fighting began on Culp's Hill, just a few hours since the engagement ended on its slopes. Ewell's troops didn't advance much, but poured volleys into the Federals perched atop the hill. In the center, the 1st Maryland Potomac Home Guard, 700 strong, attacked George Stewart's Virginians, but the musketry became too much for them, and they began to fall back. The 20th Connecticut was also approaching the enemy, bent on holding the rebels in check. They exchanged fire with the Virginians and fell back as well. The constant fire from George Greene's brigade fouled the soldiers' weapons, and they ran low on ammunition. Alpheus Williams, one of the 12th Corps division commanders, began rotating regiments, with those on the front being sent to the rear, while fresh regiments took their place. When those units expelled their ammunition, they switched back. This way, the Union kept up a constant rate of fire and fresh troops on the front line the entire time. This rotation continued throughout the day. Edward O'Neill's brigade of Alabamians from Rodes' division attacked the Yankees at the crest of the hill. Junius Daniel, commanding a brigade of North Carolinians from Rodes' division, told his superior that the hill in front of this position was, in my opinion, so strong that it could not have been carried by any force. His men were shuttled to the southeast to reinforce Stewart's brigade. A Marylander in Stewart's brigade remembered, "The whole hillside seemed enveloped in a blaze. Minnie balls pattered upon the breastworks like hail upon a housetop. Solid shot went crashing through the woods, adding the danger from fallen limbs of trees to that from the erratic fragments of exploding shells. The whole hill was covered with the smoke and smell of powder. No enemy could be seen." It was now about 10 a.m. and Stewart's brigade swung up the hill to engage with the Federals, attempting to outflank the enemy. In the attack, they were hit with rifle fire from the front and flank, and the line melted away. Stewart and Daniel didn't coordinate their movements, so by the time that Stewart's men fell back, Daniel's brigade made their attack. The 45th North Carolina performed admirable service, driving the enemy skirmishers in and holding their own on Culp's Hill, but their momentum soon lagged, and the reserve regiments moved to the front line and exchanged volleys with the Federals. With no support on their flanks, Daniel withdrew his men, but held on to parts of the hill. To Daniel's right, the Stonewall Brigade under James Walker launched their own attack. The deadly fire from the Union guns caused the Virginians to hunker down around the rocks and trees to avoid the hail of lead. Walker ordered a couple of attacks, some getting to within 15 yards of the enemy. A sergeant in the brigade got close enough to grab the flag of the 149th New York before he got cut down by numerous bullets. Walker ordered his men to fall back, an order the men were happy to follow. On the Union right, Silas Colgrove mistakenly received an order to attack the rebels in his front. The 27th Indiana and 2nd Massachusetts attacked two regiments from William Extra Billy Smith's brigade from Jubal Early's division. The Bay Staters and Hoosiers didn't last long against the Virginians before they scattered. Colgrove's attack and Smith's counterattack ended the fighting on Culp's Hill. The battle shifted elsewhere, with George Pickett's division forming along Seminary Ridge and Jeb Stuart's Confederate horsemen moving out to attack the rear areas of the Union Army.